Okay, I'm really happy that you're here. I mean, it is air conditioned, which helps. You know, you don't have to walk around out there in that hot sun, but I think it's totally delightful that you're here. And so I'm going to take you. I am a researcher. I'm a person who specializes in child development, but I'm not going to show you a single figure or chart or anything. I want to talk to you about, at a different level, things that I think I've learned from about a long time, 40 years of working with young children and families in classrooms, and what I'm seeing happening now with the push toward pre-K. And how many of you are grandparents? Right. And how many of you would like to be grandparents someday? Okay, so I think you are an extraordinarily important group, and I'm really delighted to be able to talk with you. We can make this a little interactive, except of course I have lots of stuff to say, and so if you know, but if you have a comment, if you're compelled, then speak up. But unless you want to challenge me, then you just keep it to yourself too. Okay, so so the first thing I want to tell you is that, what you're probably all aware, is that our expectations for young children are really different. So a long time ago, I went to kindergarten in Georgia, because prior to most states, Georgia had universal kindergarten. It's very few things that I'm a native Georgian that I can say we were ahead of, but that was one. And I remember my kindergarten well, because we did two things. That I remember. We had a rhythm band. Anybody remember rhythm bands? And I got to play the triangle. Well, everybody says they got to play the triangle because that was the favorite thing to play, but I really did get to play. And I have no sense of rhythm, zero. It took me 20 years after kindergarten to realize that I had no sense of rhythm. It was when I was trying to do Lamaze with the birth of my first child. Anyway, that's a long other story. So the other thing that we did, this is a working class area of Atlanta, and in our kindergarten classroom there was a piano. You know, that would be a rarity today. There was a piano, and there weren't any desks, and so we all sat around. We sat around the piano on the floor, and we practiced breathing through our noses. I could not make this up. Now, so this is a working class area of Atlanta, and I actually went to a Surgeon General's conference on brain development, whatever, some 15 years ago, and mentioned this story. They were all showing brains lighting up and various exciting things happening, and I talk about breathing through your noses. But the next day, I got an email picture from a pediatrician who was there. This is from an old textbook. Mouth breathing means adenoids. Adenoids means deadened intellect. And I thought, thank the Lord for my kindergarten. So anyway, but those are the two things I remember. But right now, so things keep changing, and being a parent is, I took this from a colleague of mine, is a chronic emergency. All right? The first, which we didn't used to have, is the decision to parent at all. It's only been in the last 35 or 40 years that we really had that control over that decision as we've got now. So people say, yeah, have a baby, get a schnauzer, you know. And those of you who are anxiously waiting for grandchildren know that the decision is going to be the schnauzer, and it's very upsetting. So, and so the question is when to parent. You know, do you wait? I mean, I counsel undergraduates. I mean, do I wait until my career is all established and then try to take time off before I make partner? You know, or do I have my babies now? And it's very stressful for young families, very stressful. But then the third thing is how to parent. You know, I'm not over-romanticizing the past, but we did used to live in larger groups where you had people around who, you know, were of different ages and who had some experience parenting before you did. And there was a lot of communities, not always, but often, there was a lot of community sense about responsibility for parenting. So new parents today are pretty much on their own. Now, sometimes they think that they do that by preference, and I think they're nuts. But anyway, But because what they learn, these rational people who've gotten through college and made partner before they had their baby, suddenly they have this irrational being. It's not rational. They don't behave like you think they're going to behave. So I have my first grandson. They would kill me if they knew I was going to show this picture, so you must never, never tell them that you knew about this. They were having, let me turn that off. They were having a hard time. Sorry, shouldn't do that, because you'll see why that's important in just a minute. They're having a really hard time transitioning this infant into more mature steps. And finally their pediatrician said at 9 months, table foods. And I thought, oh, thank God, somebody said table foods. So this is the picture of their first attempt at table foods. This is a true picture. So what is the best way to, introduce a child to table food? Now, this is not a baby who knows from a banana from a peel, right? And so, so you don't introduce the table food by handing the child the whole banana. Anyway, all right. So there are more serious things. They've gotten past this, which is really good. So they do break it up now. But anyway, I thought he was a trooper there, to try it out. But what we've got is a huge push now for pre-K. How many of you have seen this in your newspapers? Yeah, it's universal pre-K that was in the State of the Union address by the President. I'm just here to tell you, when you say pre-K, that's as communicative as saying lunch. And when you say high-quality pre-K, that doesn't is more communicative than saying high-quality lunch. Is that a yogurt? Is that a hamburger? Is that a surf and turf? What do we mean? We don't really have good definitions, but we have a lot of opinions. So this is the Pennsylvania, he's a lawyer in Pennsylvania who's pushing for this pre-K this just got launched this week. Children achieve 90% of their development by age 5. You guys, it is all over for us. As a consequence, if they don't have the exposure to language, literacy, math, social development at an earlier age, by the time they get to kindergarten, they are on the outside of the circle. Well, you know who's being attuned and attentive to those kinds of warnings? It's educated parents. It's parents who don't have to worry about this a whit, but they are hearing these messages, and suddenly we get all this stuff. We get academics becomes much more the focus. People choose their preschool on the basis of what curriculum do they have, how much academics are going on, how much are they learning. And so this is, I love cartoons. So this is the way early childhood used to be. Put away your blocks and finger paints, let's eat a graham cracker, and then nap time. And now it's put away your Kaplan primer, we're scheduled to complete the standardized assessment. That's a little bit of a joke, but not really. Your children are, and you, except you're here, are falling victim to this. So parents get concerned about choosing the right preschool. So this is a preschool enrollment interview. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which I love. Okay. Other countries whom we emulate, whom we want to be like, don't run their early childhood programs like this at all. So when you look around at the TIMSS data or PISA data, these are international comparisons in reading and math, we don't look so good. The US doesn't look so good. We do really well to break into the top third on those things. And places like Finland, the Scandinavian countries, Singapore, Korea, they're scoring much better. But when you look at, so I just pulled New Zealand, France, I just happened to, Sweden I know very well, Finland. The emphasis in all of these programs, first of all, they have programs for children 0 to 5 so that parents aren't scrambling. And it's seamless, so that's actually, come on down. Sorry. Oh, no, you're fine. No, not in the least. I'm happy to have you. But you'll see all the way through, they're talking about relationships and discovery and play. Finland, you play outside for 3 hours a day. Finland! I work with teachers who will not send children outside if it's 45 degrees. Too cold. Too cold for whom is the question, but you look at what's common about this. New Zealand begins what they can consider formal schooling, which they introduce academics at age 6. France at age 6. Sweden at age 7. Finland at age 7. So they have a different system that runs through age 5 or 6, and then they transfer into, and they assume the children are ready for more formal schooling. Developmentally, they're right. Developmentally, there are cognitive changes that are happening in children that prepare them to be more focused on what somebody calls adopting the teacher's agenda. So children under about 6 have their own agenda, right? If you've been around them, you know, right? They're off to do this and off to do that. And it's like corralling cats to get them to all sort of come. And it leads to a lot of management behavior on the part of the teachers to get them to come together and do something collectively. But by 6 or 7, they're more willing to accept somebody else's agenda and go along with the flow and focus on the things that the teacher tells them it's time to focus on, right? You learn much more quickly that way when you're really ready to focus on it than you do when people have to spend so much time getting you to the point where you can focus on it. So, but parents here, I have to be careful because I can just go on, and you don't want me to do that. So parents here are besieged with pressure to start teaching their children young. You are your child's first teacher. Come on in, you're good, you're fine. There's lots of room. Yeah. Happy to have you. Of course, you missed the best part, but that, somebody will tell you. So, okay, all right. So we get, and what's the pressure behind this? To sell. To sell. So here's something. Don't let your child. No, I'm not recommending. I'm just showing you. This is not a recommendation. 71 things. I just loved it. 71 things your child needs to know before kindergarten. Not 70, not 72, not 75. 71 things. And I thought, wow, this would have taken a little time to amass, and reaching for that 71st was probably hard. So, but you can buy this book. I'm not telling you to buy it. I'm saying one could buy this book. Look at all this stuff. So you can, you learn to trace letters. This is like for 3 and 4-year-olds. You can buy this book, Best Educational Toy for Children 4 years and older. You can get an alphabet flashcard to have at home. This is for 2-year-olds to go on the refrigerator to teach them letter-sound correspondence. You push the button, it's an S, and it goes S or something like that. And these are more flashcards, all out there, all pushing parents to buy them. This is my favorite. Now, this actually stirred up some controversy. So there's that. You know what that's in front of the baby? Not a mirror. Not a mirror. Mirror would be a great idea. Huh? It's an iPad. It's an infant seat with an iPad holder. You yourself could buy this. Don't buy this. Okay, so here we go. Why does this matter? Why does this matter? Well, it matters because no matter how much stuff changes around us, our brain evolves in a pretty, at least prescribed fashion. Things come online at different times. And our brain has definitely been changed. We don't want to get into all that. It's definitely been changed. The brain didn't know it was going to read, when it evolved thousands of years ago. And now it can read. So we can hijack the brain to do various things. But basically, there's a lot of stuff that's just sort of coming along, in a certain order, and there's not any particular reason to think that you should try to change that. So learning, for instance, begins in utero. It does, and it's marvelous. Okay, all right, here we go. So yeah, you see, I can just really stretch. I don't want to do that. All right, but so not suggesting this, but it turns out, independent of your children trying to do this, we are very attentive to language in utero because it helps us learn language very fast. We learn language remarkably fast. We learn language, we're speaking entire sentences. We know thousands of words of vocabulary by the time we enter kindergarten. How did we get such a jump start on it? Well, we got a jump start on it in part, come on down, oh, come on up. Yeah, we got a jump start on it in part because we heard our mother's voices internally. External doesn't do so good. Internal, you hear. And we absorb, as human beings, the prosody of our language. Every language has a different rhythm. And so we come in prepared to attend to the rhythm of the language around us, which is really lovely to think about. There's nothing you have to do about that. Nothing. But it's just nice to know that you want to be careful, especially if you get really emotional and curse or something. That would not be good. So anyway, so the brain gets organized on the basis of the stimulation it gets. And what it responds well to is predictive, repeating routines, experiences that happen. How many of you know? How many times do you have to read that book in exactly the same way each time? Those kinds of routines are very important to young children. As part of the job I had at Vanderbilt for a while, I was head of the Susan Gray School here, and I used to go and talk to the junior league. And so we were talking about these kinds of things, and this league member said to me, she didn't work. She said, she had a two-year-old, 18-month-old. She said, I plan a surprise for her every day. I thought, good Lord, you don't sleep. But every day we do a different thing. She said, so maybe I should repeat some of them. I said, that's a good idea. So, and then it's part of the process. Other things that are not stimulated, you want this to happen. The infant is every man. They can speak every language in the world, and they start matching what they know to the language they hear around them, and so they don't keep those connections that would have allowed them to speak Swahili, right? Unless you're a Swahili-speaking family. But we're highly dependent on these regular patterns. But a part of those patterns is the space it leaves children to try to actively make sense of what's around them. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out, as quick as they can, how things work, what they know, how to talk, how to communicate to you, how to make what they want known, how to get what they want. They're working really hard at it. In fact, the child's brain has 150% metabolism of an adult brain. And if you ever worked with children, they're just zooming around and thinking and doing. That's why they need to sleep. That's why we need them to sleep. So early experiences are really important for children. They're important for them cognitively, especially their exposure to language. They're learning vocabulary, but they're also learning what language does for you. You can't possibly learn all the words, and no matter what that state senator or whoever said about, that you learn 90% by the time of age 5, you can't possibly learn all the words by age 5, but you can learn to be interested in and responsive to language. They learn to attend, persist, understand cause and effect, and the way you learn to attend and persist is to be given a chance to attend, to be given a chance to persist at something, to be allowed to explore and stay with something. They learn emotionally, they learn to regulate their stress and develop self-control. Well, all of those, though, require interacting with a capable adult. You don't learn those on your own. You learn those because somebody's being responsive to you. You learn those because you're trying out something and somebody gives you feedback about it. Now I'm going to show you why that's in danger, but not yet. So there's some interesting work now that speaks to this academic focus in pre-K and my concern about it. And it's coming out consistently in cognitive science. Maybe not hitting the media yet, but that direct instruction really limits young children's learning. So if I directly instruct you, you will learn the thing I'm directly instructing you about. But you don't necessarily learn what else I might be able. So if I was showing you a toy and I'm the teacher, you might learn what I did with it, and then you might imitate what I did with it. But then you would go no farther, because you would assume as the teacher, I've shown you what to do with this toy. Whereas if you have something that has multiple things that can be explored, you're more likely to do it if given an opportunity to explore it. So what they say is it's more important than ever to give children's remarkable, spontaneous learning abilities free rein. This means a rich, stable, and safe world with affectionate and supportive grown-ups and lots of opportunities for exploration and play, not school for babies. So I may be preaching to the committed here, but go forth and carry this message. But if not academics or direct instruction, what should parents and preschool focus on? All right, so I'm going to give you some of my ideas. Are you still with me? Do you want to ask a question? Do you want to jump up? Do you want to move around? Do you want to? I just want to keep you. I want to keep you entertained. Okay. Well, first of all, one of the most important things is we need to provide environmental protection. We need to put our children in environments that are predictable, reduced. So although you could buy every toy in the Amazon catalog, it's probably not a great idea to do that. Because what you do is if you create this stimulatingly confusing array, it's really hard for children to focus. Keeping it a little simpler, keeping things there that can be attended to for longer, removing some of the distractions, all allows children to develop that persistence and attention that we talked about. They need to be organized. This is hard, especially when you have a young child. It's hard to get right. Organize is harder to do than it is to say. They need to be positive and warm. They need to be consistent. In any child care setting, there need to be a small number of adults and a small group size so that people can individually pay attention to your child. And you need to give children personal space to explore. So they need freedom to explore. They need things to explore. They need different textures, different noises, different shapes. They should not all be plastic. They should not all be things that once done, they're done. There's nothing more to do with them. That's why blocks are so wonderful. Children need to have some sense they have control over what happens to them. And they need to be protected from unpredictable events. So we can talk a long time about that, but we won't. All right, but let me give you 6 general rules for interaction. All right, you ready? You don't have to write them down. 1. All right, so I'll go over here and talk to these people up here. I cannot believe how stressed parents are and how serious teaching is. I go into schools and nobody's smiling. I mean, nobody's smiling. K-12 schools, nobody's smiling. So I do a lot of assessments of children for research projects I'm with. Did I just mess you up by moving around? I didn't realize you were up there. So, okay. And so I'm standing there getting ready, and we smile. I mean, we smile and smile because we want kids to feel comfortable coming with us. We give them stickers, and we want them to come with us, and we do fun games with them, but we want them to feel very comfortable. So I'm standing there smiling, getting ready to take the next child out, and this little girl, first grade, looks up at me and she says, "You're so pretty." And I thought, no, baby, I'm smiling, you know? That's the difference. You haven't seen a smile all day, and I'm smiling, and so you mistake it. Anyway, so there's some new effort going on called broaden and build, which is the idea is you learn better when you're positive. And you know this if you just think about it from yourself. When tax time comes, how many mistakes do you make? Because you just, unless you, of course, you use a CPA, and then that's terrific. But anyway, I mean, if you're under a lot of pressure, like, unfortunately, with a lot of the standardized tests we have now, we have standardized test situations that are as negative as they can possibly be for children. They don't have to be. We have situations where kids go in to take a test, and they sit for 3 hours for a 30-minute test. And they can't move, they can't talk, they can't read, they can't do it. That is not optimal for finding out what children know or can do. That's terrible. What you want people who are positive, who affirm you so that you're free to think new thoughts and put things together and organize. And so you want as parents, no matter how stressed you are, you want to smile. Smile. All right. Even be vibrant. We almost never see this. So it's worth taking a picture of it when we see it. We almost never see anybody who's really out there being enthusiastic and taking joy and having a great time. And children respond to it so positively. It's like sunshine when it happens. Okay. So, these are going to seem simple, but these are important because I don't see them. More behavior approving, less behavior disapproving. And we have I told you no data, but I'll show you conclusions. So we actually know, being from classroom data, that the less behavior disapproving, kids make more gains in achievement. Now, what does behavior disapproving mean? I don't mean just being negative. I mean, these are 4-year-olds now, 3, 4, 5-year-olds who who don't know how to adopt a teacher's agenda as their own very well. And so you go off and you pick up a book, and I say to you, well, that's really nice, but you've had a book every day this week. Why don't you go play with the blocks? Now, that sounds very nice, but what I'm telling you is what you've chosen to do is not the thing I want you to do, and I would like you to go do something else, right? Now, people will say to you, oh, you can't have a class, you can't have a home or a classroom with a... We have been in classrooms with 20 children and 2 adults 3 full days a year where we have seen not one instance of behavior disapproving the entire time we were there. How do they do it? They do it by being very proactive and predicting. So if I see that you might be going over to, before you get to make that choice about your book, I might come and say to you, I've got these great blocks over here. I bet you haven't even seen them yet. And then I'm taking you forward, and you haven't made a commitment yet for what you wanted to do. You're still out there vulnerable, but I've helped you move. The more stressed parents are, the more stressed teachers are, the less able they are to see the situation and actually get ahead of it. And the more they rely on behavior disapproving. And the more you rely on behavior disapproving, the tenser you make your children, the less learning you have, and the less self-regulation you get. Because who's regulating? This is like when my 7-year-old had asthma, right? She got diagnosed with asthma at 5½. And she was on medication, daily medication. And so there it was at the table. And she stood up without taking her medication. And I said, Alice, this is not my best parenting moment, but I said, Alice, I don't understand, you have to take this every day. Just take it. Why don't you remember to take it? And she said, I don't have to. She's a little, But she was right. She didn't have to. I was going to remind her every single time. And so, some of this, the more we do this behavior disapproving, the less self-regulated children are going to get, the less internally regulated they're going to get, because they're going to get dependent upon you to be regulating their behaviors. Okay, math. Now, you didn't expect that one, did you? Ha. Do you know that early math skills are more predictive of school success than early literacy skills? You know that. Yay! How do you know that? Oh, well, all right, perfect. So early literacy skills do predict reading, but early math skills also predict reading, and they predict math, which early literacy skills don't. Now, we don't know exactly why this works, but we do know that math and these self-control mechanisms for children are highly related to each other. We don't exactly know which one's causing which, but we know they're highly interrelated. So this ability to have control, to gate out to what we call distractions, is related to learning math. I'm not quite sure how this happens, and people are getting really interested in it. But what happens is we get all these public service announcements for literacy, and it sucks all the oxygen out of the room. And I want to say, no, wait. There are lots of things that you can do that involve math early on. And kids are intrigued by math. They love to count things. They love to match things. They just need to be given a chance to do those sort of interactions with their parents. So the more children are engaged with math, the greater we got gains in self-regulation, as I said. But they have to get, it's not just adult-led teaching. They have to get involved with math. There have to be good math materials around. And there are some now, but you just have to be able to pick them as a parent. That's things that can be explored that help teach children about math. Okay. All right. Organization. Organize and inviting. The less organized homes are and classrooms are, the more behavior disruption you get. Now, of course, this is not rocket science, although maybe. It makes sense. If there's disorganization, disarray around, and you've got vulnerable children who themselves are having a hard time figuring out what their routines are and what's predictable, the more chaos there is, the longer it's going to take them to develop a sense about what is the right kind of behavior, how things work, what things mean. They tend to engage in less play. They have less positive social interactions. They do more solitary play, and they're more stressed. So what we can do as grandparents is go and clean house. I know they won't let us. Okay. And environments that children are in have to be places where interesting things happen and children are engaged. And it's not just interesting things that happen on an iPad. You know, you have to be able to touch things and make things happen and move things and feel things. You can't feel what dough or plasticine consists of from an iPad. I just showing you some engaged children. Okay, let me go on. And the trouble is, the trouble with universal pre-K is that the default that I've seen in these preschool classrooms is training. It's training for the next environment. It's training for school. Crisscross applesauce. Don't touch your neighbor. Walk down the hall with a bubble in your mouth. You know what that means? You know what that means, right? Keep your hands behind. There's another phrase for that we have to walk down like this, and you can't talk. I've been, incredible. These 4-year-olds. So they go into the cafeteria, which is not set up for 4-year-olds. And they can barely see over where the lunch ladies, who are hired because they're mean, so so they can't see them, and they say to them, and so there's a hamburger and a I don't know, lasagna, sloppy Joe there, and a hot dog. And they were supposed to have made that choice at 8 in the morning. Right? So now it's 10:30 or 11 because they feed them at ungodly hours. And they go in and they're looking, and the hot dog looks a lot better. And the lunch lady says, "What did you choose? What did you choose?" And he says, "Hot dog." And then the teacher yells at him, "No, you didn't choose a hot dog. You chose the sloppy joes." Okay, so and then you sit down and you're not allowed to talk. So I've been in schools where they hang a big flashing light, and when it's on red, you've seen this. When it's on red, nobody can talk. I've never seen it in any other color. So nobody gets to talk. That's training. That's not academic. So I'm concerned about academic instruction, but I'm very concerned about this emphasis on training so that you'll be successful in school because you know how to do school, not because you know more stuff. We have had a whole generations of kids go into school without this kind of training, and they've done just fine. Right? I watched my own daughter hit kindergarten and figure out the rule about raising your hand in about 30 seconds. Right? The rule is you raise your hand, you get called on. You don't raise your hand again because you're not going to get called on again. I mean, it's simple. So you learn that rule right away. It doesn't really take a year of practice to learn how to do school. And unfortunately, that's what we see a lot of these these pre-Ks that are going in and connected to the public school wind up with a lot of emphasis on training, managing, and in general, children need many fewer rules. They need organized environments that are safe to explore and fewer rules about how to do it. Okay. All right. So adults should listen more to children. Now, I'm going to talk about parents here for a minute, but let me just tell you about teachers. So I take a lot of data in classrooms. Do you know how, so now we're talking 2 teachers and 20 kids in a 4-year-old classroom. Do you know what percentage of time the teacher is talking? Not during nap time now. Right. Parents and teachers all need naps. You know, kids are supposed to be sleeping, but it's really the naps are for us. So would you like to guess, what proportion of time is the teacher talking? What are you saying? 90, somebody said. You would be exhausted. It is 70, it's about 73%, 75%. It's just, and kids get to talk about 24% of the time, but 9% of that they're talking to themselves. So I don't know if you count that or not, but anyway, they spend a lot of time talking to themselves because there's nobody listening to them. So, because the teacher is talking, she's not listening to the teacher. She's not listening to children. And it's really hard. Remember, we've talked about how idiosyncratic and individualistic children are, and they're actively trying to make sense of the world. And if you've ever talked to a 3 or 4-year-old, or had one as a grandson or daughter, you know they're very funny in terms of what they think, how they think the world works, or what they think happens. You know, and it's delightful. You take delight in it. But a teacher doesn't know it because she doesn't have time to listen to them. So it's not likely to happen in classrooms. It's hard to do well. So what we need for our children is we need it to happen at home. If it's not likely to happen in a classroom, it's got to be happening at home. And that means that the adult has to make herself available. That means you get on the child's level. You watch what the child is doing. You try not to interrupt. And then you respond to overture. Children will invite you in if you're there and open to being invited. I watched 2 children. Now back to the classroom. I watched 2 children because I had been observing them. And they had these paper clips of different colors. Right? But they were big. And they had gotten this idea that they were going to use them to measure how big the room was, which I thought was kind of cool. So they were stringing them together, and they were these different colors, but they weren't attending to that. They were stringing them together, and they were figuring out, and they were they couldn't count that high, but they were actually just interested in stringing this whole thing together and just seeing if they could get it across the whole room. And the teacher walks up to them, possibly because I was there. She thought she needed to teach. So she says, "What color is that?" And I watched these children go, like, because it wasn't colors that they were in. They had nothing to do with what they were doing, And so it stopped them cold, and they had to, reorient their thoughts and figure out how to answer. When in fact, if she'd just taken a couple of more seconds to attend to what they were doing, she really could have extended that activity in lots of different ways in terms of helping them really know how to make that measurement. But she didn't know what was going on. And instead of waiting to see what was going on, she stepped right in. So you've got to wait, you've got to see, you have to practice waiting for children. But parents, okay, here goes I'm on a mission. Parents are actually listening to their children less these days. And here's why. The new media. People are very concerned about the new media and its effects on children's being involved in the new media. I have a different concern. So I recommend this. This is a new thing that's just up on YouTube called Look Up by Gary Turk, which is trying to recommend that people look up from all their media. It's terrific. You can find it by Googling Look Up. Mom, could you push us, please? 1 second, 1 second. So we have an escapee. And someone who's in grave danger of being dropped. And that's the new dinner time interaction, right? Now, why should we be concerned? I have gotten extremely concerned about this because it's really hard to change. And the younger generation is, I don't know how, are you having these experiences where you sit down to have dinner and people whip out whatever is on their phone is more interesting than the people they happen to be with? I know none of you is guilty of this. You've seen this in others. Here's why it's important. So, what you realize when you look back I want you to look back for a second. Look at the faces. You can't see that face. Okay? The faces are really important. We've known for 35 years that the most consistent evidence has shown that the most debilitating maternal situation, because it's been studied mostly in mothers, maternal situation is depression. These studies started out, because I've been around a long time, so these studies started out, I was reading them when they were first started, and they were studying children of schizophrenic parents, children of depressed parents, children of bipolar, and they fully expected that the children of schizophrenic mothers and bipolar mothers would be worse off. It wasn't true at all. It wasn't true by a mile. The condition that was most long-term and affected children was depression. And we were able to replicate experimentally what depression looks like in what's called the still face experiment, which you can also Google. You can see it. Ed Tronick, still face experiment. It's been around now for a long time. And what he did was he had mothers with their 11 or 12-month-olds and to put the babies in an infant seat and had the mothers go still, not respond, which is like depression, and which is, I'm going to argue, the way people look when they're on their media. Children became more and more distressed in those situations. They flailed back, they scrabbled their hands, They would look over to the mother again. Trying to get a reaction. Now, you do have to wonder about these mothers who were able to maintain this. But anyway, so, but they did. And this is a consistent response on the part of the baby. They were very distressed by this non-responsive face of the parent. So there's a new book out called The Big Disconnect, Protecting Children and Family Relationships in the Digital Age. And this woman interviewed, it's more of a popular book than it is a scientific book, but she did a lot of interviews of parents and of children. And she says, I'm just quoting some of this, children hate it when their parents pick them up and are on their phones, I've seen this, and don't even turn to say, hi, honey, how was your day? Instead, they're giving them a shh, 1 minute signal, which basically says, you're not as important to me as whoever this other person on the phone is. Car rides to and from schools, as well as dinner, bath, and reading time. Car rides. Now listen to that. That's all. Car rides to and from school, dinner, bath, and reading times. Parents should be present and phone-free. Kids do not need our undivided attention all day long. Lordy, no. They want to explore. They need to do things. They don't need your own. You don't need, first of all, you couldn't bear it to just hang about all day. But they do need them in real-life moments of talking and reading and doing the hard work of parenting, dealing with meltdowns, teaching them how to pick up their clothes, and so forth. The bottom line is, if you think your kids don't notice when you're distracted, you're deluding yourself. One of this woman's subjects told her, he was 4, I miss the olden days when families were more important. I think we're in a very dangerous time right here. And I'm not just, you don't want to just say, well, you just be like an alarm crier. But I think we're not aware of the signals that our behaviors are sending to our children. And our children 0 to 5, 0 to 6 are really vulnerable, really vulnerable. So we have this combination of, when we do interact with them, we're using flashcards or trying to figure out whether they have learned things. And when we're not interacting with them, we are not attending to them at all. We're not being responsive. We're on our email or our iPhone or our iPad or doing something different that signals we're not interested in you. So I'm going to conclude, because this is final words. So just 4 things. I mean, I've given many things, prescriptions all along, but if you just had to wrap them up, 1 is, when you're with your children, be in the moment. If you're going to the zoo, go to the zoo. Don't go as though you're presenting the zoo to your child while you can be on your email that's attached to the stroller. And if you go to the zoo these days, you will see it. It's as though the zoo is there like a movie for the child, but not for them to enjoy together. I don't know how they can ever talk about what they saw because the parent didn't see what they saw. So, when you're going to be with your child, be with your child, and be in the moment. Show respect for them. Now, so my book club was last night, and I was talking about that I was hesitant about that I was going to broach this with you guys today. So, and this woman who's been married for 50 years, she says, I love going to Starbucks. And when I go to Starbucks with my husband, I just love being there. And we get coffee and we sit down. And the first thing he does is pull out his iPhone to check his emails. And she said, I just want to say to him, that doesn't seem very respectful. That seems to indicate you don't care about me. And we all said to her, well, do you say that? And she said, no. So I think we're so offended by some of this stuff when it happens to us that we don't even think to speak up and tell people to, no, you're either with me or not with me. And if you don't want to be with me and you want to check emails, go sit at a different table. We need to be so attentive to our children that we actually take joy. That's the positive part. I mean, the reason, when I first started, my research was with middle school underachieving boys. You can't know how fast I wanted to get out of there. So, and I had the great good luck of working with children, you know, from about 2 to 7. And it's the perfect age. It's perfect. They're interesting. They're not trying, well, they might try to manipulate you a little bit, but they're really, you know, they're trying, they want to interact. They're fun to figure out what they know about. And it's just such fun, you know, to figure out what they think about the world and to realize how much that's going to change. But right now it's like watching a clock with a back off. You get to see all the circles turn and all the gears turn and see how things are being made sense of. Which gets the last thing, which is that you want to treat your children's learning as an intellectual puzzle, not something you control in the sense that you are dictating what it's going to be, but something you can assist because it's so interesting what they're getting interested in. You know, dinosaurs, or my son's first word was truck, trucks, things that move. You want a curriculum, or if you're going to have one, or activities that actually can be responsive to what children are interested in learning about and carry that farther. So, I'll take comments or questions or responses. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. So you have 2 questions. First of all, what I've just said to you today, I don't think is any different if you're talking about children who are growing up in poverty or you're talking about children who are growing up with educated professional families. In fact, I think some of the dangers we worry about poverty, about the lack of parental attention, is increasingly happening in our professionally educated parents because of all this new media stuff. So when I look at a preschool class, or a classroom, I don't think it should be a place where I would put my grandson. And if it's not a place I would put my grandson, I don't want to put poor children there either. And we get into the situation where we think, so we know that children, this is a long answer to your question, we know that poor children are struggling. They're struggling for the very reasons I told you about. They're struggling because they're in more chaotic environments, and it takes longer to make sense of them. It takes longer to develop those rules about how things work, and also control over your own behavior and control and to resist distractions. My data would suggest are coming in about a year later, and it's due to this complexity and chaos of the environment around them. So one of the things that I would like to do if we were to do universal pre-K is figure out how to reduce that chaos and how to reduce that negativity and make a positive, organized, reduced environment in which young children can learn and feel affirmed. And I think that will take us a lot farther than what we are doing today, which is, you know, sitting children in large group. So I've done an evaluation of Tennessee Voluntary Pre-K, the scaled up pre-K program here in Tennessee. And children are in whole group instruction at age 4 for an hour and 40 minutes. Right. So this is not going to take us anywhere. This is not going to have the kind of consequence we think it is. So if we're going to do universal pre-K without talking about what pre-K should be, without doing more empirical investigation of how to make it better, then I would not be in favor of it. And I'm not making friends with my colleagues, I'm telling you, by saying that. But I don't think we should just adopt an empty word and put children in something and then expect a miracle when we're not doing due diligence on what should be happening in those environments. So, Head Start. It's not effective. And there are many reasons why it might not be. So we didn't study Head Start for a long time, so we didn't actually study what was going on in those classrooms for a long time, because there's a long history here. Head Start got very defensive about being studied. Congress mandated a study of Head Start in the 2000s, and now we have it, and we've had impact studies up through 3rd grade, and there were very few immediate impacts of being in the program, all gone by 1st grade and totally gone, still gone by 3rd grade. So we have to do the same due diligence with Head Start that we need to do it in all kinds of programs that we're thinking should affect and create better outcomes for children. I'm an advocate for children. I want children to have better outcomes. I'm not an advocate for a solution by itself without having proven effectiveness. That's a long answer to your question. Yes, ma'am.
Correct me on this if I'm wrong, but whenever I hear talk about universal pre-K, I don't hear very much, unless it's lip service, about parental impact and parental responsibilities and assisting parents, especially younger parents, in terms of what they can do to help their child. Because there's one thing that could be done in the institution, but if there isn't a connection with the child, with the parent at home, working along with what's going on there, or to advise them of what they need to do to help their child along, it seems as though you're only going to get half of the effect, because the parent is still paramount, I think, in terms of educating a child, and especially a very young child, and getting them to where you want them to be when they get to formal education.
Good point. The best parenting program, the only one that shows consistent positive effects, is a program that starts at the birth of the child, or actually at the end of the pregnancy, where a nurse visits. It's called the Nurse-Family Partnership. And I think the reason that that's so successful is because if you remember those first months when you had a baby, this irrational, biologically driven lump, that's a perfect time for somebody to come in who has some expertise, who can talk to you about, well, that's normal or that's not, in terms of, he's turning all red, or he's got a rash, or or he's got this or that. Is that normal? I mean, the things you worry about as a parent of a newborn. He can't lift his head yet. The things a nurse can tell you that assure you and help you bond with your child. I think that's the reason that program has been so successful, is because it's credibility there. You have a lot of credibility as a nurse coming in to a newborn, and the parents totally receptive to hear that. Most of the parenting programs after that, well, you've all come to know me now. I'm blunt. Most of the parenting programs after that don't know a lot about the circumstances that parents are engaged in, or the circumstances surrounding them that would be affecting and maybe causing the parental behaviors you're seeing. And I'm not for imposing parent programs on parents without knowing the context and whether what I'm asking them to do is actually culturally and just resource-wise appropriate for what they can do. So I think we should provide a whole lot more support for parents, a whole lot more, and it should be more individually and sensitively provided to them. And we're not doing a great job of that right now, unfortunately. But I agree with you. I think it would be helpful to parents if they could have this kind of support.
And if even the universal pre-K was successful, do you see it being as successful as it could be without that parental assistance?
No.
Support, resources?
And that's one of the criticisms of it, is that by putting it in the public schools, that parents are pretty much shut out of the public schools a lot of the time. So we make our way, and those of us who have confidence will go in and talk in those schools and make things happen for our child appropriately. But there are a lot of parents who don't feel that confident, and so that's one of the concerns, is that a public school, a universal pre-K, means it's in the public schools, or it could mean that. And so would that be a concern? Would that shut out parents a lot sooner? And that is a concern.
So, in my limited observations, it seems to me that educators are for, like what you were saying, that young children should play, and preschool should be about socialization and all that, which I agree with you. But I know you said that sales is pushing this other model, but is that really what it is? Like, why? What's the real reason that now kids in kindergarten aren't learning math and spelling and writing, and their brains aren't developed to do that?
I wish I knew. Right. I think parents are vulnerable to sales, and people now realize that if you say it's an educational toy, that'll make it sell better. So yes, but that was sort of too flip. I think I think you're right. I think we see these kinds of international comparisons and we get concerned, and I don't think our response is appropriate.
Right, like the ones that you showed, like Finland, which I've read has one of the best education.
Right.
It's about playing 3 hours, right?
Yeah.
So why aren't we following that model?
I don't know.
Okay.
I really wonder. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how we lost control of kindergarten. And I just really, I don't, it seems to me it's a limited kind of pedestrian response to a real issue that needs a lot more thought about it than we're giving it.
And when these kindergarten children have homework, isn't it the parents doing the homework?
Right. Well, I still remember science projects, so I learned a lot of science, right? Thank you so much. You've been a pleasure.